Good job. See, it's that easy. I knew your teams. Who has not gotten this book? Who has, oh, well, that's 100% of you.
So, remember, I told you that they didn't have it in the bookstore.
They don't?
They don't.
Has anybody besides you looked into it?
The other guy that usually sits there,
Yeah?
I forgot his name.
Forget his name,
Me and him went at the same time.
Okay, and they said we don't have it
They don't have, so they have like a
online.
online version, but it's like $120.
It's like a ripoff. I mean, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's how they get you nowadays. We're gonna do our best. I'll give you the info as we need. And if you have it, you're in a really good shape, okay? So, because you get to read it. But I mean, besides that, you get the, you know, get the video from me talking. So if you can't read it, I'll give you only, you know, you're only gonna be tested on the resources you have. I'll put some resources up there. You got the Constitution, you got the Bill of, you know, you got the Declaration. We're discussing these documents, the book's discussing these documents. So the test quiz or the just things you write that I talked about last week are gonna be on the documents that you read, and if you don't have it, you can't do it, right? So the documents of which we've been discussing so far, we discussed the Mayflower Compact, we discussed the Declaration of Independence. I put up the thing for you. Who did not see the assignment that I put up? Okay, please go to the assignment. Did you see the announcements? Who's not getting your announcements? Are you not checking your email? Check your email. You should get an email announcement says you have an announcement, or a Blackboard gives you an announcement. I've put these up. You always check your announcements. I'm noticing, and this isn't for you who come to the lectures. This is for you, which if you're not watching this, it doesn't matter because you're not gonna get it anyway. I'm noticing people aren't watching the videos. You're watching the lectures, you're here, okay? But the problem is when I'm noticing a low number of watches, that means students either have a high level of drops that I'm unaware of, or people are just like, man, I get till later. So I'm gonna pay attention to your announcements. Okay, and that's for everybody who's not even here, and I'm gonna try to get through to them, I'll email them. Because it's very important that you watch the videos, because if we don't have a book, then the content is gonna be primarily from the lectures, of which I probably should have let you know that in the beginning anyway. The content of the class is primarily from the lectures. I'm a lecture heavy guy. I like to talk and I like you to listen. And the way we get, and you know, the way I know you listened is you do the assignments. And then when the quizzes come, which they will be coming very shortly, the material will come from the quizzes, from the lectures and the reading that I give you via the lectures. All right, make sense? Now, of course, I've got you here, and you are the faithful, right? It's like preaching to the choir, liberally in your case, right? Because you're part of the church, part of the worship team at the church. But my hope is that we can communicate with the rest of the class, which is about 29 students. That means there are 24 extra students besides you. And see what we can do. See if we can get these, get the attendance, so to speak, way up. All right, got quite a bit to talk about today, and I have my book here as my outline. I got my outline as an outline, and let's just talk a little bit about the Articles of Confederation, right? The Articles of Confederation. What did you learn thus far about them that I have discussed?
It was a weak form of government or constitution that didn't really secure the rights of their citizens.
How do you secure rights when you got very little power, right? And what was the motivation for keeping it weak? I think we discussed this. A lot of it had to do with the Revolutionary War and from whom they were rebelling, right, revolting. And, you know, they're coming out from under an oppressive regime. The states had been ruling themselves in a sense. They didn't call themselves states at this point. for a while. I mean, you know, until they have to levy taxes. Okay, how many of you were here on Thursday? Huh?
I watched the videos.
You did watch the video.
Yeah, I like your YouTube videos, just so you know, like, we're watching.
You're so nice, you're the one. Like them, if you like them, cause then I get a better algorithm, and like I said, I'll be a YouTube sensation, right, you know? Yes,
I was able to watch all of them except for that last one that you posted. I don't know why. Every time I put it
It
in,
was
it
a
says
weird link, so I subscribed to his YouTube channel, and that's how I watched
Yeah,
it.
I
'Cause
subscribed.
the link that you put on Blackboard, it had like a studio collect, and when we went to the link, like I copied and pasted,
It was like error.
it would say like, oops, error.
Yeah.
I'm
So I
gonna
just-
change that today then.
Yeah, I
I
just
will
went
change
to
that
your
today.
YouTube channel.
That explains it. That explains why I have thousands upon thousands of watches of the other videos. By that I mean tens. You know, and I only had like 5 on this one. So I give this lecture about how bad everybody is, and it turns out, it's my fault. Okay, well, good. That's good to know. That means people didn't just leave. Okay, good. Excellent. So that means the rest of you didn't even get to watch Thursday's lecture because you were neither here and the video was, did you try to look at the video? But you couldn't.
No.
You got the oops.
I watched it.
I was here.
You were here and then you were here. So you 3 there and you missed it and you missed it.
I missed it.
Well, that's not bad. I mean, 40% missed it because of this class, but that means everybody else missed it. Okay. Part of what we were talking about was we talked about the Articles of Confederation. We talked about the fact that, you know, coming out from under this oppressive regime, the last thing you want, the states wanted was to recreate that, right? And they were, and so there are other problems that emerged with the Articles of Confederation. Okay, it had no ability to levy taxes. What does it mean to levy taxes?
They couldn't collect them.
You can't collect them. It was all voluntary, and who's gonna volunteer all their money to the government? Nobody likes taxes. How many of you like taxes? Right, you know, and you know that's why in you know, politics, when you see the two sides arguing, they're gonna go, there's a big argument about taxes. They're always like, well, they're gonna raise your taxes. They're like, no, we're only gonna raise the rich people's taxes. You know, but of course, what does it mean to be rich? Well, see it all in the definition. Then you find out a police officer and a nurse, their combined income, you know, husband and wife, puts them in the rich bracket. And they're like, oh, no, we're getting taxed. And they're like, well, you're rich. And we're like, but we're not really rich. We're just a cop and a nurse. You know, you think it's all these Wall Street bankers dressed like the Monopoly man with a monocle in his eye with a stick, you know, with a big mustache. And those guys who, you know, billionaires, right? No, it turns out to be, you know, taxes. And people hate taxes because we like to keep our money, right? We don't like to pay for other people's stuff. You don't like paying for other people's stuff, do you? No, because that's what taxes do, except for roads. That's your stuff too, right? You gotta drive on road. What about, you know, police officers and firefighters, and you know, we want those guys. Some of us want them, and you know, and then so taxes. They had no ability to get these taxes, and so and then as far as treaties go and coining money, they had the right to coin money. This government did, but the states were doing the same. The states were acting like their own little countries to begin with. And then, to get anything done, to make any changes, it had to be unanimous amongst the states. All 13 of them had to vote on it. So any one state had veto power over anything that they were trying to make a decision over. Very difficult. And it was almost useless. And so a convention is called. And the goal of the convention at the outset was kind of to address these problems and to fix it. But almost right away, it was discussed and argued for that the change that needs to take place is we just need to scrap the thing and start over. Okay? Now, they have to start over with and think, what are we gonna do? What's our plan? And all governments have three branches, correct? The judicial, the executive, and the legislative. Legislative creates the laws, judicial branch interprets the laws, and the executive branch executes the laws, right? Now, we discussed that different types of government, whether it be monarchy, the rule of the one, aristocracy, the rule of the few, or polity, or democracy, whichever you want to choose, the rule of the many. That's dependent, where the power lies, how you divide those branches up depends on the type of government. With the rule of the one, all three branches are in the monarch, okay, the one person. With the rule of the few, the aristocracy is broken up in those three areas, okay? So, how are we gonna divide these powers? That was a question. And a debate. And how is representation going to affect each state? So keep in mind, there's a problem of power here. You got 13 states saying, I don't want to give up my sovereignty. What is sovereignty? Independence or self-rule, right? It's kind of like the debate now of, like Brexit. England doesn't want to be under the EU anymore. They want their sovereignty back, their self-rule back, right? They don't want all the decisions about what goes on in England being made, in Europe. And there's, big debate over what's called globalism right now. That, we're all part of a world, home or whatever we call it, and we don't want to give up American sovereignty, right, to the UN, the United Nations. And there's this belief that one political party does want to give up our sovereignty, right, become part of the global community, and there's another group that says, no way, man, do not. We're Americans, we rule ourselves, okay? Well, this debate was going on before America was America in this sense. We had 13 colonies. They're all in a sense rebelling against the Articles of Confederation at this time, okay? And so they want to rule themselves. And then they say, well, if we enter into this United States and fix these problems, which would require a stronger centralized government, a stronger federal government, how is that going to affect our sovereignty or our self-rule? And the smaller states recognized, the states with less population recognized, if we do this, it's possible that we may be being governed by places like New York, which had a larger population than the southern states did. And there were plans drawn up, okay? And there'll be 3 plans that were discussed, and then some compromises that were made, okay? They did recognize a need to be able to levy taxes for sure. They needed a stronger government. They needed to fix the problems that we'd already mentioned. And so you had first the Virginia plan. Okay, this is James Madison. Now think about this. This is he's from Virginia, and so too was Thomas Jefferson. These guys believed themselves to be citizens of their state. They did not see themselves as citizens of the states, but of the state. And so anyway, the Virginia plan had a monocameral legislative branch. And that's the big deal, is the monocameral. That means they had a legislative branch, like a Congress, and it was based upon population. So the larger population you had, the more representation you had. Does that make sense? The more representatives you had, the more votes you would have in Congress. Does that sound fair? Why not?
You're asking me?
I'm asking, well, I saw you,
The bigger cities.
remind me your name?
Chastity.
Chastity. Tell me why.
The bigger cities would practically control not control, but tell the smaller cities what to do.
Yeah, the power would be in those people, and the people who are like the states that had less people would be like, well, I guess we're just giving up our sovereignty to New York now, right? So they're like, yeah, that sounds great if we were in the majority, but guess what? We are not. Why don't we just stay here, stay out of this union, and you guys go make your own country, and we'll stay our own, right? And they're like, we don't want that. We want you, right? And there's a need because, you know. So you had the New Jersey plan, and that was bicameral. Now, this is going to have only one representative, and you know, more. It's not going to end up being what we ultimately get. Okay, and in the book, there's a nice set of differences. Okay, but the New Jersey plan took a different approach. They added a second, not house, but a second part of the legislative branch. Okay. There was a third one. It's called the Connecticut plan, but it's really called the Great Compromise. That's what we're looking for, is the Great Compromise. And the compromise created two chambers of Congress. You had the upper house, upper chamber, called the Senate. Each state would get 2 representatives, and that created equality, parity between the states when it came to power. Okay? But there's a lower house chamber, and we call it the House of Representatives. And that was determined by population. So now New York clearly is going to have more members in the House, which makes them more powerful in one sense, because it gives New York equal representation I mean, think of it from a New Yorker standpoint. Are you telling me that, I don't want to say North Carolina, because North Carolina had a lot of people at the time. Are you telling me that Rhode Island, who wasn't there for the convention, are you telling me that they should have equal representation to New York, which has so many more people? Think about it. Wouldn't that be fair? That would mean each individual person in Rhode Island has more power than the individual in New York. Make sense? Does that sound fair? Should not representation be equal to each person should have just as much representation as the next? So New York, think about that. Do you think 10 people should have the same amount of power as 100 people? Or do you think that would mean those 10 people have more power individually than the 100 people? Do you guys understand what I'm saying here? What's your thoughts?
I think that, it shouldn't be legislating, where like if the 100 people have the same power as just 10 people.
So you're saying they should have the same power? Like, per representative, I mean, see, the House of Representatives does that. It divides up the power and gives each person a certain amount of power per House per representative, right? Each representative represents so many people. You have more people, you have more representatives, correct? But again, the states, they're not looking at it that way because they're not a country yet. They're looking at it as individual states that are autonomous, self-ruled. And they're not gonna enter into this saying, oh yeah, we'll give you all our power. So they want state power. So this is a big debate, even today. State power versus federal power. There are people who want to get rid of the Senate. Why? Because they recognize that people from Montana could get in the way of what New York and LA want to do. Okay? Because the Senate brings equality among states, the House of Representatives brings equality amongst voters. Does that make sense? So each state right now has how many senators? 2. And that was a compromise. The Great Compromise created a bicameral system in which the upper chamber created equality amongst the states, if not amongst the people. What it did was it gave, trying to think, there's 1 or 2 states in our nation as we speak that has more senators than representatives. I know. Or equal, I'll get to that. Well, I'll remember what it is. I want to say Idaho or Montana. It's not Montana. And I don't think it's Idaho either. It's like one of those states, South Dakota or something, but it's not South Dakota, I think. We're getting this on video. Everybody's gonna be like, thumbs down, it doesn't have. Don't worry, I'll get it, put it up there. All right. The next compromise, though, is interesting because keep in mind what are these compromises? And here could be a great test question. What did the compromises serve to do? What was the goal or the end of the compromises? Basically to get the other states, all the states, to ratify the Constitution. Because if they didn't compromise, they were not going to ratify the Constitution. They were not going to enter into the deal if there were no concessions made. Which, by the way, created a great document that was able to change, but keep in mind, it was imperfect. Was the Constitution perfect? A lot of us look at it like it is scripture, and that's fine. American scripture, not necessarily inspired by God, but compromised by men. And no man is perfect, right? If men were angels, there would be no need for government. But men are not angels. Therefore, we need government. The Great Compromise, or the compromises, because I haven't got to the 3/5 compromise yet, served to get them into the Union, to ratify the Constitution. Which brings us to the 3/5 compromise. I think it's an interesting compromise.
The what compromise? 3/5?
3/5, not the 6/10. You gotta kind of reduce it, remember? Does anybody know what the 3/5 compromise was in here? So the southern states owned slaves. The northern states did not. If you read the book, the northern states are innocent. They loved all people, right? And that's not true. Not true at all. There are a lot of bigots in New York, just like there were in the South, okay? But there was a belief long before the Revolutionary War that slavery was one of the twin barbarisms. What is a twin barbarism? Two of them, twins, right? What were the two barbarisms that might have been practiced that the world needed to get rid of? One was polygamy, and the other was slavery. Now, up until Mormonism in America, which originated in America, so it's not here yet, they had already felt that they'd gotten rid of one of the twin barbarisms, right? Polygamy. But they had not gotten rid of the other, slavery. Slavery is part of the history of the world. It's not an American invention. Slaves, you can look back, long before America was created, slaves existed in every culture. And it wasn't racial, necessarily. The Jews, if you read the Bible, clearly they were enslaved by the Egyptians, okay, 400 years. The Irish used to enslave themselves. The Romans had slaves. The Greeks had slaves. They all enslaved each other. What the warring tribes would enslave the children, rape the women, and kill the men. Okay, that was the practice. America inherits the African slave trade. Okay, warring tribes in Africa are selling each other into slavery. America's buying them. The Brits bought them. The world bought them. Okay, so there's a discussion. They believe that the slave trade needs to end. Okay. And of course, there's the economics of it. There's a problem here. Because now, the South, their economy is kind of run off of slave labor. Okay, so they're like, so what you're saying is, you want us to enter into this deal, okay, and our economy is based off of this. So what they were saying is, we want more representation. I think this is a bad deal for, the Southerners wanted their slaves to be counted as citizens for the purpose of representation. But they did not want to count them as citizens in the sense of rights. Go ahead and say it.
Hypocritical.
Absolutely hypocritical. They desired power with no responsibility, with no duty to their fellow man. Because who gets the power? The slaves or the slave owners? The slave owners get the power to vote in who they want to vote, so that they can benefit from their representation. And are the slaves being represented? No. And I love that you call it hypocrisy. And there's a term they used. Okay, what do you do when you want to deny somebody their rights?
You're going against God?
Well, I believe that, yes. Yeah. Okay, so let's take the Declaration of Independence, where Thomas Jefferson says, all men are created equal and, endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. How do you violate somebody's rights? You deny their humanity, right? And so, the Three-Fifths Compromise said something like this. Every 3 slaves or 5 slaves will equal 3 freemen. Okay? basically, they were 3/5 human, they're saying. Denying their humanity, because if they're humans, then they have rights. And if they have rights, we have a duty to protect them, correct?
Correct.
And so it's the same thing. What did Hitler do? What did Hitler do when he killed the Jews? He denied their humanity. What did, I want to see, let me see, blah, blah, blah. They have, the book has a term they used where they referred to them, let me see, inhabitants. They were not citizens, they were inhabitants, okay? What do you do, and here's the abortion debate. All humans have a right to life, and women are pregnant with humans. Do those humans have a right to life? If you say, well, a woman has a right to abortion, that means that human that she's pregnant with doesn't have a right to life. Thus, the statement, all humans have a right to life, is false. It turns out to be some humans have the right to life. Humans outside the womb have a right to life, whereas humans inside the womb do not. But then they go, well, no, the statement, all humans have a right to life, is true. But women are not pregnant with humans. And thus they changed the name. What are they pregnant with? Fetuses. So as long as you change the name, do you really change what a woman's pregnant with? No. So anyway, the debate still rages whether it was with slaves, the slave trade, or with abortion today. Okay? The 3/5 compromise went something like that. You will get, the representation of 3 free men for every 5 slaves. Why did the North do this?
So they can ratify the Constitution.
Because they would say, no, we're just going to take our ball and go home if you don't do this. They had to make, if the South got their way completely, it'd be like 5 for 5, right? And again, so the South is now getting more representation per person via the House of Representatives, right, based on slave ownership. And that's significant. That's a lot of power in the House. Now, of course, keep in mind, they were vastly outnumbered by people in the North, okay? So, again, they're worried about being overrun by the power of the House, because these states still want sovereignty. Now, I said this in the video last time, I think. Until the Civil War, people still did not view themselves as citizens of, quote, the United States of America. There was a big debate over where, this stuff. They were not interested in a huge country. They were interested in their state, their home state. Now, I think we've all talked about it. We're all proud of the great state of Texas here, right? Some are, yeah. Okay. Unfortunately, with the Civil War, Texas was on the wrong side of that, okay? I don't want to tell you that, all right? But things have changed. Thank God. Well, so from this, now we finally get the Constitution ratified. Now there were other things that were going on, by the way. See, as America was moving westward, right? I'm doing a camera west, right? They just assumed the states would continue their borders going across, right? Their borders would get larger.
Oh, Lord.
Wouldn't that be weird? We'd have all these, basically, it wouldn't have been 13 states, though, that would all striped down. What ended up happening, Rhode Island was really upset about this because they were landlocked and they were unable to spread,
Oh, yeah.
so they're like stuck in there and they're like, wait a minute. So that had to be put to bed too before all this went down. So there was a lot of compromise. And so compromise served to ratify the Constitution, okay? But let's talk about the Constitution once it was ratified. Keep in mind, in order to create this Constitution, they had to commit treason against the other one. And show them, go, hey, guess what, guys? Look what we created, and and you're expected to follow it now. We were born into a Constitution. We didn't really choose it, did we? And if we go anywhere else, we have to accept the Constitution they have. It'd be hard to start our own country at this point. Have to go find more land, probably defend it from others who are coming in to say, no, that's ours, right? It's not like we go out in the middle of a lake and find a little island there and go, hey, this is mine. And you like buy it, and it's your own. You can own the land, but you can't govern it like it's your own country, right? I'm gonna erect an army and create taxes and put people in jail. I think, they'd call that kidnapping, stuff like that. Well, anyway, okay. So we talk about the Constitution. What do you know anything about the Constitution? Let's talk a little bit about the Constitution. I know we got quite a bit of time. I don't know if we use it all, because I didn't, but let's talk about the Constitution. Does anybody have their book on them with the Constitution in it? Yeah, the little penguin book. Let's break that up. Constitution is broken into articles, right?
I'm getting into it.
This is a good little book. It's a Penguin Guide to the United States Constitution. If we turn to page 21, it says, "We the people of the uppercase United States, in order to..." Why is that important, the uppercase, the United States, rather than the lowercase united uppercase states?
Because now they consider themselves as a country instead of just
Unified, right? Yeah, it's a proper noun now. We're talking a name of a new group, the United States, and it's no longer the states that are united, right? For the cause of the revolution. We the people of the United States, and this is important, in order to form a more perfect union. I like that. More perfect than what? Than what? Articles of Confederation. Very good. Now, more perfect. Does it say in order to form a perfect union? No. Why not?
nothing's perfect.
Not only is nothing perfect, I think these guys understood that they were men, and like we said, no men are angels. If men were angels, we'd need no government. But more than that, they probably recognized that in this Constitution, the compromises that had to be made were to accept certain imperfections, as we just discussed, so that they could put this thing together. All right? In order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. So why do they do it? Why did they do it? To ensure, right, to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Those are the reasons they did this, okay? This is what this is supposed to do. Let's talk about what is the government doing this? This is what the federal government's supposed to do. Domestic tranquility. What is that? Somebody give me an answer.
Domestic, I know means like.
What does the word domestic mean?
Household?
Home.
Yeah, like home,
Yeah, and it doesn't talk about your home.
yeah.
It's talking about the homeland, right? So when they're talking about the country. Tranquility amongst us as a nation. So it promotes that, so we're not gonna be fighting amongst ourselves, right? Okay? That there'll be peace within the borders, okay? Now, so there's gonna be some federal laws that prohibit and require certain things to promote domestic tranquility, right? Does that make sense? Do you guys pay attention to the news? None of you. Well, I've been talking a lot about the riots going on right now. There's a distinction between rioting and protesting. Is it okay to protest in America? I can walk down the streets holding a sign saying, abolish abortion, okay? People may not like me because I do this, but I have a right to do it because I'm doing it peacefully, okay? But then I pick up a brick and I throw it through a cop's car window. And I start bashing Starbucks, you know, right? Is that domestic tranquility? That is not domestic tranquility. Okay, so part of it is this Constitution is going to give the federal government power to promote domestic tranquility. Whether or not it's used or not right now, that's a different opinion, okay? Each one of these are kind of vague, though. What do I mean by vague? They're not really clear. They can apply in many different ways. Would you agree? They have presidential power saying, I'm going to do this because it promotes domestic tranquility. They go, yeah, but it doesn't say that. The Constitution says, well, it's under the domestic tranquility part, you know? That's what I'm doing. And Congress makes a law, says we're doing this too. And, anyway, so provide for the common defense. Okay, so the government needs to do what? Defense from what? Other countries. Or piracy. Okay, that was a big deal. Okay, the Barbary pirates. We established the Marine Corps in 1775. The Marine Corps came alive before the country was under the United States. Okay, and they established that branch of the military in order to be the fighting force of the Navy, so that they could protect against piracy. What's piracy, by the way? It's where they used to take over, and this is still common to this day. These guys, they board ships, take over the ships, hold them hostage, steal the goods, sell the goods, whatever, all that. And anyway, it's not Jack Sparrow from guy who dresses like Keith Richards from the Rolling Stones. All right. Promote the general welfare and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Okay, the general welfare, that is a weird thing. It's pretty vague. We don't know what that means, right? But whatever it is, the powers of the Constitution are given to the different branches in order to do this. And so we get debates over what is federal government for? What is it supposed to do? Is it supposed to take care of you or merely just defend your rights? Like right now, we have the Payment Protection Plan, right? What is that? That's because a lot of people lost their jobs because of COVID. because they shut down the government. And thus, people are left without any money to pay their bills, specifically rent. Okay, because renters aren't exactly the people, people who have, imagine you own a building and you have to pay the bank money, right? And the bank's not gonna say, oh, I'm sorry, we're not gonna take your, we're gonna hold off on this. So you gotta pay them, and now your renters, the people who rent from you, they can't pay. What are you gonna do about it? Kick them out? Oh my God, everybody's out of work right now, right? Because of COVID. So what do? We get the Payment Protection Plan. Congress passes it. They distribute checks so that people can start paying their rent. And they also do an eviction thing where they freeze it. They say you can't evict anybody, which is kind of cool, right? You've heard of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the government, in this regard, in such a crisis, is providing for the general welfare of people. Now, where does the government get this money from?
Taxes.
Yeah, don't worry about it. You'll be paying for this for a while, okay? This money's not free. There's an old acronym, TINSTAFL. There is no such thing as a free lunch.
I know that, because they just recently passed a law, I know Trump did, about federal income tax, because I work, so I look at each time my job takes money out of my check.
Trump didn't pass it, the legislative branch passes laws.
Exactly, you're right.
He'll sign it into law.
And so I know that they're gonna stop taking like federal income tax.
Yes.
For like the next 2 years.
Oh, that's okay. In that case, that's not a law. You're right. Okay. Yeah.
And I do know we have to pay it back at some point, but I think.
Pay it back. How do you pay back what is yours? What he means is no. It'll start again. But yeah, federal income tax. I got to look into that. I want to see if that actually is working out. But yeah, that's one way we collect taxes, right? What's another way we collect taxes? You go to they're called consumption taxes. Payroll taxes are one way. If you earn money, they take it, right? But then they also have consumption taxes. Every time you buy something, you pay a tax on it. You consume gasoline at the pump, that's a lot of taxes right there, state, local, and federal. And then you got taxes coming from food, food and beverages you buy at the store, anything, you got sales taxes, taxes upon taxes, so yeah, don't worry about it. If they're not yet taking one way, they're gonna take it another, okay? They're still getting their money. And by their money, I mean, they're still getting your money. So even though you get a check in the mail, keep in mind, it seems like free money, but it's a loan. Because it's gonna come, you'll pay it back through taxes, and so will our kids. That's the problem, is our kids pay for all the things we vote, free money for. All right. But yeah, I mean, the government is helping out in this case, and this would be a really big deal, okay? In fact, here, let me give you an example, like with Shays' Rebellion, which happened right before the Constitutional Convention. That was kind of what tipped off a lot of this, was right after the Revolutionary War, the farmers, they were just broke. And they couldn't get a deal, they couldn't pay for stuff. And there was no hard currency. What's hard currency? Gold and silver. See, money, this is going to take a small lecture on money here. We could print money, right? But the value of it depends on certain things. Now, if you back it with gold and silver, every dollar represents so much gold or so much silver. Then it's a note that says, here is a piece of paper that represents gold. And if it's not backed by gold or silver, then it's really just paper. We went off that gold system back in the 20s, and we have what's called the fiat system. Okay, it's just kind of like, okay, we'll believe it's worth this much money. The more greenbacks you have, the more pieces of paper you have, the less money is worth, or the greenback is worth. It's kind of like supply and demand. So you have what's called fiscal policy and monetary policy. Monetary policy determines how many greenbacks are in the system. And so, the Fed generally controls that. Not an expert on this part.
Federal Reserve.
Yeah, the Federal Reserve. So that's a big deal. So that's a lot of power, by the way. So whenever they put more money into the system, they start printing money. If the government's going broke, what does the government need to do? They either need to raise taxes or turn on the printing press. Let's say the government owes you a bunch of money, right? Or owes China a bunch of money. And if we tax you, we're gonna make you broke. Okay? So we can't afford our debt. Let's just say we can't afford our debt, which we probably can't anyways. It's like 20 trillion now. And if you look at the debt clock, it would really freak you out. Okay? And I'll show you. And it does freak you out. So what do? You turn on the printing press and you make more greenbacks to pay your, let's say $20 trillion. I can't pay it. So let's print out $20 trillion. What does that do to the money you have in your hand?
The value of the money goes down.
That's right, it's called inflation. Okay? That's why a dollar buys less now than it did when I was young. I found 50 cents one day when I was like 10 years old, and my buddy's like, dude, we're going shopping. And man, we bought the biggest bag of candy, and we're like, I'm so sick of eating candy, you know? And 50 cents, man, that's a joke now. You know, that's nothing. Even to a kid, they'll be like, what the heck am I gonna buy with this? You know?
That's true.
So yeah, these guys, they had no money. It was Shays' Rebellion. So a bunch of guys, these farmers, they didn't have enough money to pay their debtors. And it ended up they're trying to bring in their goods and stuff and to do it. So there's a rebellion, you know, trying here, I'll give you my hay, I'll give you my chickens, my eggs, or whatever. And so it turns out about 1,200 of them kind of started rioting. And they were all caught, sentenced to death. And of course, none of them were put to death. So that's a good thing. Okay, that didn't happen. But that's kind of what had started them down the road of the Constitutional Convention. So Shays' Rebellion is actually very important. Okay, let's not. We're talking about, you know, what the Constitution's there to do, provide for the general welfare, and in this regard, that's kind of one of the things that helped get the Constitutional Convention going. Was this idea that the people couldn't pay their debts. And we're in a similar situation right now because the government shut itself down and shut restaurants down, and there are literally hundreds of thousands of people out of work from the restaurant industry because you're not just shutting down the owners, you're shutting down all the waiters, the waitresses, the bartenders, and the bus boys, if they have them anymore. All the people who work there no longer have income. What happens when people don't have income?
No money, you're not paying taxes.
They're not paying tax. Well, that's a great one. Then the government's not getting money. What else is happening? They're also not spending money at other places. And what happens when they don't spend money at other places? They go out of business. So it's in the government's best interest, right, for the payment protection plan. We need to keep ourselves going. And so it provides for the general welfare in this case. That's what I would argue. Okay? Some would argue that government shouldn't be in the business of doing that at all. I don't know. There are 7 articles in the United States Constitution, or the Constitution of the United States, however you want to call it, what to say. Let's take a look at what they are. If we break it down into a list, the first one starts off with Article 1, Section 1. All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and a House of Representatives. I'm not going to read the rest. I'm not going to read all of it because it'll take too long. I just wanna, talk about that. Why is that the first one listed? The branch of government. Why is Congress listed first? Because it's the most important. Because the power of government is supposed to lie in the hands of the people through the consent of the governed. That Congress, these are not monarchs, they are not given by God. God didn't say, these are your leaders, they will tell you what to do. These are your representatives, and we'll talk about different models of representation as we go through this, okay? Talks about the House and the Senate. You got the different sections. Talks about what the powers of the Congress are, and we will definitely do that, go through all of that, but we're not going to today. We're just gonna go through the basics of the different, the 7 articles, okay? What they are. Article 2, Section 1. The executive power shall be vested in a president. Notice, not a king, not a committee. All right. Shall be vested in a president of the United States of America. He shall hold his office during the term of 4 years, and together with the vice president, chosen for the same term, be elected as follows. All right? Then it talks about the Electoral College as to how they will elect the president. Why is the Electoral College important? Why was it important back then, and why is it still important today, It's the same reason we discussed, it's the same reason they needed senators. And the same reason for the compromises. Because if you just have a straight election, popular vote, then the most populous states will win the presidency. And the smaller states will have less of a say in the president of the United States. So we have an electoral college in which we try to, in our case, you want your party to win the great state of Texas, right? And if you're in Nevada, you want your party to win the state. You're just trying to win in the state. You're not trying to win. You could care less how they vote in California. I mean, you want them to vote the same way you do. But their vote does not count towards your electors, right? We have so many electors in Texas, right? So we're trying to win the great state of Texas for our view, whatever your view may be, right? So if you're a Democrat, you vote Democrat. And if the majority, you win the majority in Texas, then you win all the electors in the great state of Texas, right? And they vote the way you do, you want them to, okay? We try to win the state, not the popular vote. Hillary Clinton had more votes overall than Donald Trump did in the last election. But Donald Trump had more electoral votes because he won more states. Does that make sense? Chastity, you're looking like, what? I don't like this, or I'm confused. Tell me what you're thinking.
Well, no, I get it. It's just, the whole process of it. So like, it's the fact that we have to vote for our representatives in the state, and then the representatives in the state will then vote for the party we want. No, we have to vote for our party that we want.
Well, yeah, let's say you vote for, let's say Shannon Holzer's running for president against, say, Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Okay? So Let's pretend I threw my hat in the ring, and let's pretend I'm of a particular party, okay? If you won the popular vote in Texas, that would be me, if I won it, okay, then there are a certain number of electors, and they're actually required to vote for me in the Electoral College, okay? The winner. It's kind of like a winner takes all, okay? And so your goal is to get the largest number of electors to elect the president, right? So each state, that's why the president goes to, or the candidates go to Texas, California, New York, Ohio, Florida, you know, and the like. Why do they do that? Well, because those have the most electors. They have more electors in the electoral, they have more electoral votes. Does that make sense? And that's why Donald Trump won. It's because he won more electoral votes. Hillary Clinton won California, New York, all the East and West Coast states, all the high populated states, and yeah, she got a lot of electoral votes, but they only have so many, but they have such a huge population. She actually had more people vote for her, but they were in different states. They were in, you know, once you win the state, you win the state. Doesn't matter if you win the state by 1 vote or 1,000,000 votes, okay? California, it's always gonna go blue. Okay, Democrat. New York, it's always gonna go that way. Chicago rules Illinois. The rest of Illinois, they vote Republican, but they're overrun by that city. They're trying to they actually want, you know, Chicago to become its own state. Anyway, that's how they do it. Okay, that's the importance again. It's to keep a balance. Okay, so that, you know, even New Mexico and Hawaii and Alaska and Montana and Idaho, they have some sort of say, okay, in the president, albeit small, they have a say. Okay. Article 3, if we started with Article 1 and and that was Congress, and Article 2 was the presidency, what do you think Article 3 is going to be? Judicial. Now, if the legislative branch was first, and I suggested that it was put first because it is the most important of the branches, what did the framers think about the judicial branch putting it third? Yeah, that's probably the natural assumption, that it would be the least important, or at least the least powerful, right? Because the legislative branch creates the laws, and the executive branch, the presidency, executes the laws, puts them into action, right? Well, the judicial branch is just there to make sure that has taken place. They judge the laws. Now, some would say they judge, not, you know, like if it's a criminal court, you judge the person as to whether or not the law was broken or not. But in other ways, they judge the laws to see if they're constitutional. They're not just judging people against the law, they're judging laws against the Constitution. That's important. Because that is one of the ways they keep the legislative branch in check. We're going to talk about checks and balances. So let's quickly read just this, and then maybe we can call it a day. Article 3, Section 1. The judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court, and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. Who establishes the inferior courts? Congress. The judges of both the Supreme and inferior courts shall hold their offices during good behavior, and shall, at stated times, receive for their services compensation, which shall not be diminished during their continuance in office. Okay? How long do judges in the inferior and superior court, Supreme Court that would be, hold their office?
For life.
Doesn't say for life, but it says as long as they have good behavior, right?
Until they're ready to like step down.
Yeah, or they retire.
Mhm.
They either retire or they're taken away for bad behavior. How do you get rid of somebody in this governmental position for bad behavior? You have to impeach them. Okay? Very hard to do. I didn't mention it, and we didn't read it because I just basically read Congress. Did I read the Congress one? I did, right? But I didn't tell you how long they're in office. How long are your representatives in the House of Representatives? How long is their term? 2 years. How long was the president's? 4. Okay. 4 years.
Technically, he can get elected twice, right?
That's correct. How long, how long does a senator stay in office?
6 years.
6 years.
Why that's a big difference.
Okay, well, they broke it into, we're gonna talk about lawmaking and all that. The upper chamber was seen as a more, I don't wanna call it aristocratic, but the upper chamber, you hold a little more power because it's 2 representatives, right?
Whereas the
Other ones are, based on population.
Yeah.
And so one has to do, some believe it just has to do with the more regal of the 2 houses. And if you're a House member, you generally would love to become a senator, okay? Go to the upper chamber. And there is power in the Senate, believe it or not. There's power in the House too, okay? But the Senate seems to hold more, okay? Who holds the Senate right now, the Republicans or the Democrats? They do. Who holds the House right now? Democrats, okay? Interesting, huh?
Yeah.
Not a whole lot of lawmaking going on.
Yeah, because they keep debating against.
It's like the House sends up, creates a bill, sends it up to the House. The House just says, oh no, I'm gonna look at it. They don't even have to look at it. Does not. So that's why you get these Congresses that don't do anything. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? It can be a good thing. It creates stability. How old do you have to be a congressperson? 25. 25. All right. Says the Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators from each state chosen. But, oh, by the way, they changed this. This was changed. The Senate used to not be chosen by voters, but by the representatives. Okay? So anyway, let me see what we got here. Immediately after, they shall be assembled in consequence of the first election. They shall be divided as equally as may into 3 classes. The seats of the senators of the first class shall be vacated at the expiration of the second year. Basically what it's saying is they leapfrog. There are 3 cycles. That way all senators are not up for re-election at the same time. Does that make sense? Why would they do that? Stability. You don't want your government changing too quickly and too dramatically. Do you understand what I just said there? So like 1/3 of the senators right now are up for re-election. 2 years from now, another 1/3 of the senators will be up for re-election. 2 years from then, the last 1/3 will be up for re-election. So they're not all up for re-election at the same time. How old do you have to be a U.S. Senator?
25. About 25.
30. So you have to be 5 years older, okay? President,
38?
35.
Really?
25, 30, 35. Now, is there anybody in here old enough to be a congressperson yet?
No.
Who's the youngest one right now, I think, in Congress?
Alexandria.
Sandy Cortez. That's her real name. But she goes by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Why?
Sounds more
Sounds
appealing.
better, sounds political, doesn't it? It's like, whatever. She made it work, so she's, okay. Probably one of the most powerful people in the US right now. She's got a very big following, and a lot of people on the Democratic side do not want to upset her, because if they do, what do they lose? All of the people that follow her, they lose their votes. It's very important, and she could raise a lot of money too. Lose voting and money in campaigning. All right, so we talked about at least the first three articles of the United States Constitution, which do what? Establish the three branches of government. We talked about what the three branches do briefly. One makes the laws, one executes the laws, one interprets the laws. We also talked about the age groups, correct? All right, good. Reading assignment. Read. It's a lot of reading, but not that much reading. Read the first three articles of the Constitution of the United States. Again, I'll put up the who, what, where, when kind of thing, but it'll be more like who, congressperson, what, and what do they do, where, I don't know, because it doesn't mention in the, when, maybe, talk about their elections, right? Talk about, tell me their ages and all that good stuff, all right? I want those all in bullet points. I did put up the other assignment, okay? So I want you to go through and do that. Okay, look at the announcements. No questions? All right, ready, we can